SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, my name is Swayam Sharma and we are doing Introduction to Chinese Studies course. Today we are going to do the third lecture on Confucianism. Now the word Confucianism obviously comes from the name Confucius, who was a great Chinese philosopher. Confucius is a Latinized version of the Chinese name Kung Fu Zi, which simply means Master Kung. Confucius was born in 551 BCE at Chufu in Shantung province. During those days, it was part of the Lu state. This is the spring and autumn period. So this was a period of weakening of the Zhou dynasty. As a result, there were many regional states which had come up, and so Confucius belonged to one such state, the Lu state. Now, Confucius was always engaged in affairs of the state. He tried to serve his own state, Lu. And during this course, he derived certain principles, certain ideas. And those ideas came to be known as Confucianism. Now, in Confucianism, basically, he wanted to emphasize on tradition, the tradition of Chinese civilization, beginning with the mythical sage kings like the Yellow Emperor and the other emperors who were basically deities in Chinese society, worshipped by the people. Plus also the tradition of the first three dynasties, Xia, Shang and Zhou dynasty. Especially Confucius emphasized on Duke of Zhou, was the younger brother of the first Zhou king. After the death of his brother Wu, King Wu died, and Duke of Zhou served as a regent to his nephew, King Cheng. And he was a philosopher. He gave the concept of mandate of heaven. He was a statesman. He divided the land among the Shang elite so that there is no opposition to Zhou rule. Okay, so overall he was considered to be a great personality, a sage. And so Confucius idealized the Duke of Zhou. And he believed that the Chinese society had degraded because it had given up the principles of those ancient sages. Now, these principles were basically related to concepts like filial piety, that means showing respect to your ancestors, worshipping dead ancestors, and also cultivation of virtue. So, he emphasized on the cultivation of virtue, which is through education. So, in this lecture, we are going to look into details of all these concepts in Confucianism. Confucius in his own lifetime was not very successful. His political career was not very successful. He tried to help different rulers, initially in his own state, Lu. Later on, he traveled to some other states, but there are very few people who listened to him. But during this course of his travels, he collected a number of disciples who became his followers, and after the death of Confucius in 479 BCE, the disciples continued to develop Confucianism. Confucius died in his hometown. He is buried in Chufu, and there is a temple to Confucius there. Large number of Chinese people go to Chufu for pilgrimage because Confucius is worshipped as the revered ancestor by the Chinese people. Okay, so let's look at some of the important things in Confucianism. First, let's look at important books which are the source of Confucian philosophy. These books are attributed mostly to Confucius and his disciples. Okay, let's look at them. There are four books. So the first book is Great Learning. Great Learning, Ta Sui. Ta Sui, Great Learning. This is a commentary on a chapter of Book of Rites by a student of Confucius, Zhengzi was a student of Confucius. He wrote a commentaries on several chapters of commentary on so that is known as Great Learning. The second important book is Doctrine of the Mean. Doctrine of the Mean. This is attributed to Zhi. Zhi was the grandson of Confucius and a student of Zhengzi. Then the third one is the Analects. Analects, of course, are the speeches and discussions of Confucius with his disciples. For example, Yan Hui is a famous disciple of Confucius, who is an important character in the Analects. And these books contain various teachings of Confucianism. Then the fourth important book among the 4 books is Mencius. Mencius are again speeches and conversations of one of the followers of Confucius, Mencius. So Mencius is generally considered the second great philosopher in the Confucian tradition after Confucius himself. Okay, so his speeches and conversations are also part of these 4 books. Then there are the 5 classics. Now I need to mention that these 4 personalities here, Zhengzi, Zhi, Yan Hui and Mencius, these 4 are known as the 4 great sages of Confucianism. So after Confucius, these are the 4 great Confucian philosophers. And in fact, still now in Taiwan, there is a special position for the descendants of these 4 sages. Of course, Zhi is a descendant of Confucius himself, so that is the descendant of Confucius. So they have a very important position in the Taiwanese government, basically a ritualistic position. Of course, in the mainland China, it is under communist regime, so no such post exist. Then there are the 5 classics. The 5 classics are, first one is the classic of poetry. Now these are various songs, hymns and eulogies to ancestors and sages and deities. And it is believed that they were composed in the early Zhou period. And basically it is believed that Confucius compiled all these songs in the form of a book. Second important work is the Book of Documents. Traditionally, it consists of 58 chapters, and these are records of the mythical period, the mythical sage kings, the Xia dynasty, the Shang dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty. Okay, so these are sources for Chinese history of that period. Then the third book is Book of Rites. Rites basically refers to rituals. Okay, so there are 49 books, and these are mostly from the late Zhou and early Han period. So this is basically after Confucius. Many of these rituals that were performed were compiled in the form of book. Number 4 is I Ching. It is famous as this book is famous as I Ching. In Chinese, it will be I Ching or Book of Changes. Now this is a book on divination and cosmology. There are many mystical things, how to predict future. It's quite popular in the West, in the spiritual circles, New Age circles. Okay, so this was the 4th classic, and the 5th is Spring and Autumn Annals. These are historical records of the state of Lu, to which Confucius belonged. So together, these 4 books and 5 classes are the sources of Confucianism. And in China, this was basically the syllabus for the civil service exam. So if you wanted to be a civil servant, a Mandarin, you had to study all these all these works. You have to master them and write long essays based on these 4 books and 5 classics. Okay, so these are the sources of Confucianism. Then let's look at some of the ideas within Confucianism. What is Confucianism all about? The first important aspect of Confucianism is the education system. Confucius emphasized a lot on education. A person has to be educated, and Confucius himself was an educator with a large number of disciples. The goal of Confucian education is not technical education. It's not about acquiring skills to earn a living. It's about cultivating your character, which is called as gentleman cultivation. So the goal of education is to make someone a gentleman. The Chinese word is Chunzi. It means Lord's son. So it's basically means becoming an aristocratic person. Okay, and aristocratic person in the sense of learning. Okay, so you have to basically go to a master. So there's a need for a teacher. So a pupil has to approach a master, a teacher, and learn from that teacher. and that teacher should teach the examples of the past sages. Okay, so the way the past sages have behaved, those behaviors should be taught, those aspects of the behavior should be taught to the pupil by the master. As a result, the pupil is supposed to develop what are known as 5 cardinal virtues. Okay, and then if you are able to cultivate these 5 virtues, then you are considered to be a gentleman in Confucianism. So let's see what are the 5 cardinal virtues, which in exact translation actually means 5 constants. The first one is Ren. Ren means benevolence. Benevolence refers to being kind-hearted. Okay, if you see someone in difficulty, someone in pain, you should be broad-minded enough to help that person. Okay, you should not be arrogant. You should be kind to people. So that is the concept of benevolence. So that is the first virtue that needs to be cultivated in a gentleman. The second one is E. E means righteousness. Righteousness means the right behavior, how to behave in a proper way with people. Okay, so there's a proper code of conduct for a gentleman. You cannot behave like a ruffian. You have to be very civilized and cultivated. Okay, so that is righteousness. The third virtue is Li. Li means rites. Rites basically means rituals or propriety, that if you see an elder person, you should bow down before the elder person. You should respect the king. The way you should behave with women. Okay, so these are all rituals, and you have to make offerings to the ancestors and the gods. It includes all aspects of life. Basically, rites include like how do you wake up in the morning, how do you dress, how do you go to sleep, how do you eat. So all these aspects are covered in rites. So a person should be expert in all these daily rituals. That is Li. The fourth virtue is Chi. Chi means wisdom. Wisdom means the ability to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. Okay, so this is the fourth virtue. Then the fifth one is Sin. Sin means integrity, honesty, okay, loyalty. Okay, so you have a particular duty, you have to perform that duty without being corrupt, okay, without escaping from duty. You should be dedicated to your duty. And so these are the 5 cardinal virtues, and if you have all these 5, then you are considered to be a truly a good gentleman. Okay, truly a true Confucian pupil. Now, so although Confucius gave his educational philosophy, there is a dispute among his disciples on certain aspects of this. As a result, there are 2 broad subdivisions within his educational philosophy. Now, these 2 subdivisions are represented by 2 great philosophers who came after Confucius. First one is Mencius, whom I have already mentioned. Okay, Mencius is also a Latinized name. Mencius is Latinized version of Meng Zi, master monk. Okay, so when the Portuguese, they went to the Chinese court, they basically Latinized the names of these 2 great philosophers, because these were the 2 most famous, Confucius and Mencius. And the second one is Sun Tzu. Okay, Sun Tzu. So Sun Tzu or Master Sun. Now, what is the difference between the 2 philosophers? According to Mencius, human nature is innately good. From within human beings, all human beings are good. And the goal of education is to bring out those good qualities from within a human being. So according to him, education should be free-flowing. It should not be very strict. Okay, every student should be allowed to develop according to his own tendencies. Okay, keep the student away from corrupt practices, but don't use very strict punishments. Don't make the students memorize a lot of things, because all the learning would be understood by the student in the course of time. So that is the purpose of education, to give direction to a student so the student can develop the qualities which are already within him. Based on this, he believed that there are, say the cardinal, if you look at the cardinal virtues, he believes that gradually in the course of a child's development, the cardinal virtues automatically emerge. Okay. So, for example, benevolence. How does benevolence emerge? According to Mencius, what happens is that seeing suffering in the world, a child gradually starts developing distress. So, whenever a child sees someone in difficulty, someone in pain, there is a distress that develops within that child. Okay. That as a result, benevolence emerges from that child. Okay. He starts becoming kind towards others. Okay. So, that has to be, the teacher has to cultivate that quality and not let the pupil become corrupt or deviate from that innate goodness. Second one, righteousness. How does righteousness emerge? According to Mencius, this emerges through shame. Okay, from a child, basically, if a child does something which is not considered to be good in society, which is not liked by the parents, the child develops a sense of shame. Okay, so gradually that shame leads the child towards righteousness, because if a child does something wrong, he feels a sense of shame. Okay, so that is number 2. Number 3, rights. The rights of propriety come in a child due to deference towards tradition, deference or reverence towards the past behavior. Okay, so as this sense of, this basically means a sense of respect towards the past, sense of respect towards the ancestors and the gods. Okay, because of that, a child starts performing rituals out of this sense of respect. So, a master is supposed to train a student how to use that reverence in order to perform these rituals. Finally, a feeling of right and wrong also comes from within, and that leads to wisdom in a child. Now, in order to maintain all these qualities, you also need integrity. Okay, so you can see, according to Mencius, the 5 cardinal virtues are already there in us. When we are children, it is already developing within us. So, the goal of the master is not very difficult. The goal of the master is to set a good example and to guide the student in the process, in a natural process of developing these virtues. Sun Tzu disagrees with all this. He completely rejects this idea given by Mencius. He believes that human nature is essentially evil. Human beings are naturally attracted towards evil or against virtue. Human beings are naturally attracted towards vice, not towards virtue. Now, Sun Tzu was a practical kind of a philosopher. He worked in state and served different rulers, and so due to his administrative experience, he developed this idea that human beings have an evil nature. Now, if you compare Sun Tzu with, say, other philosophers, he will be closer to Machiavelli and Thomas Hobbes in the Western tradition. That human nature is essentially selfish, attracted towards vice, the lust for power, indiscipline, all these things are there. Now, if that is his assumption about human nature, what kind of educational philosophy will he propose? So, the educational philosophy proposed by Sun Tzu is based on strictness, based on punishment. Okay, so he believed that education should be very strict. The goal of the teacher is to fully control the pupil, because the pupil would be naturally attracted towards evil tendencies. Okay, so it's a duty of the master to beat the student, force the student to perform his duties, to study his lessons, memorize the classics and all that. So, you can see that so in different points of time, in different points of history, either Mencius or Sun Tzu was popular in China. For a long time, Mencius was considered to be the more important philosopher, but especially in the modern times, Sun Tzu is being emphasized by some of the Chinese thinkers. We are going to see more about this later. So, let us move on. So, this was all about Confucian education. Let us see the next idea. Next is social relations. So, in Confucianism, social relations are very important. Now, what is the relevance of social relations? Social relations are important in order to maintain harmony in society. Only a society which is harmonious can be peaceful and prosperous. If there is always a conflict in society, that type of society cannot progress, that people cannot be happy in such a society. So therefore, harmony needs to be maintained, and harmony is based on the principle of hierarchical relations among unequals. If there are two people who are unequal in their status, they should have a hierarchical relationship, and if people are equal, then they should be having friendly relations. Okay, so it's like Aristotle, who says that there should not be any equality between unequals and inequality between equals. Okay, so it's similar to Aristotelian concept of justice. But the most important aspect of social relations is filial piety. Xiao means filial piety. Filial piety, of course, means respect for your elders, also for the dead ancestors. Okay, you have to make offerings to dead ancestors, perform the annual rituals celebrating them, because the Confucians believe that their spirits live on, and the spirits are capable of influencing the lives of the descendants. Okay, so they have, the ancestors have the power to help their descendants. Of course, for Confucius himself, supernatural aspect was not very important. So ancestors may or may not be able to help you, but simply performing those rituals was good for cultivation of your own self. Okay, so rituals by themselves actually help us become better people, according to Confucius. So that is why, even if, say, rituals don't have any magical power, still it is very important to perform those rituals. Now these I told you certain relations are hierarchical, others are non-hierarchical. So let's see, there are 5 bonds or 5 great relations. The first relation is between king and subject. Okay, so there's a relation between the king and the subject. So king is superior obviously here, and subject is inferior or subordinate. So that means the king has to be kind or benevolent to the subjects. It is the duty of the king to protect the subjects. It is the duty of the king to provide for the subject. You know, in China, the state had certain role to play. Vivian Xu, scholar, has written a very good article on this, that the legitimacy of the Chinese state depended on 3 things. Okay, welfare or benevolence, you can use any word for this: welfare, glory, and truth. So Chinese state traditionally should, and even now according to her, should represent all these 3 to have legitimacy. So the king was supposed to provide welfare to the people, and the ancient kings did that by maintaining the granary system, by storing food grains, and in case of famines, distribute them among the subjects. Glory, of course, is gained by expanding the power of the Chinese state, by gaining more and more tributaries, by defeating the barbarians. Thirdly is truth. The king also should represent the truth by financing or sponsoring scholars, supporting education, and so on and so forth. So king had those duties towards the subject. In return, the subjects should be obedient to the king. They should pay respects to the king. Okay, they should kowtow before the king. Hit your head on the floor. Okay, so they should be obedient towards the king, and in return the king would protect them. You can compare this to, say, the current Chinese state also. The Chinese Communist Party also behaves like a paternalistic state. Okay, because it's a party state controlled by the Communist Party, the People's Republic of China. So it behaves something on similar lines. It protects the people, it provides them economic development, tries to bring glory to China in foreign policy, and also controls information, and so it represents the truth in that sense. And Chinese citizens are expected to be obedient to the state, be patriotic, and so on and so forth. Now then there is the second great relation, that is between father and son. So here the father represents the king and the son represents the subject. So just like the subjects have to be obedient towards the king, similarly the son has to be obedient towards the father. In fact, in traditional Chinese society, father had control over the life and death of the sons. Okay, if the son misbehaved, then the father could even beat up and even kill the son without any sin being incurred. Okay, people did not consider that to be a sinful act, because the son had to be completely obedient. Just like the king had the power of life and death over the subjects, the father also had power of life and death over the son. But in return, the father had to provide security to the son, provide whatever necessities the son required. Say, if a son was living in poverty or did not have food to eat, or was not able to marry off his daughter or son, so that in that case the father would lose the face. So it is the duty of the father to provide for the son. It's the duty of the father to protect the son, take responsibility over the son's family also in case the son was in need. Okay, then in the absence of father, the role of the father was taken by the elder brother. So elder brother was like a father. So if the father is dead, then the elder brother is the head of the family, and the younger brother would have to consult the elder brother in all the matters, like for example getting his children married and so on and so forth. In all those matters had to consult the elder brother, and it was the duty of the elder brother to see to it that the younger brother's family is being maintained and he has enough food to eat and so on and so forth. He is not living in poverty. So this was a similar kind of a relation. Then the fourth is husband and wife. You can see all these four are hierarchical relations. Okay, the husband and wife is hierarchical according to the Confucian system, which was a patriarchal system. Man was considered to be superior to women. So the role of a woman in society was that of a wife. Okay, so a girl was supposed to get married and serve the husband. Okay, and it was the duty of the husband to protect the wife, provide for and so on and so forth. And in return, the wife was supposed to be obedient to the husband, help him and so on. Whatever is, this is a traditional patriarchal family structure. Out of the five, the only relation which was on equal terms was friend and friend. Okay, so being a friend was considered to be a very formal and a very important aspect of Chinese society. So if you have a friend, it is like it was publicly declared that these two people are friends. So in case a friend is in need, the other friend had to come and help him. Okay, so and in case the friend is not able to help his friend, then he would lose his face in society. Okay, if your friend is not doing well, then the society would laugh at you. Okay, would not consider you to be a virtuous person. Any virtuous person would help a friend in Chinese society. So in this way, if these five bonds were maintained according to the Confucian thought, there would be harmony in society. Society would be very peaceful and happy and so on. Right. So social relations were more important than, say, right and wrong, and it was more important to provide harmony in society than to provide justice. Harmony. So just like justice is an important principle in Western philosophy, both Plato and Aristotle emphasize on that, and after that other Western philosophers also. In China, it is harmony that is considered to be more important. Say, if someone someone commits a crime in a family, then in order to prevent crime, you can punish the other family members also. So if the son commits a crime, the father can also be punished for that. That was the Chinese policy. Okay, so that there is deterrence in society. Okay, so the family becomes the main instrument of virtue in society, because if, say, the son commits the crime, the father will be punished, and therefore it is the duty of the father to ensure that the son does not commit any crime. So in that way, and similarly, say in a village, if in a village there are a few people who rebel against the king would punish the whole village. In fact, in some cases, like if a person used to go against the king would not only kill that person, but the entire clan. Okay, all the cousins and nephews and grand uncles and everyone will be wiped out as a collective punishment. That was to ensure harmony in society. So this was the second aspect after education, social relations. Now the third aspect of Confucianism is social hierarchy. Now the goal of social hierarchy in Confucianism was maintenance of meritocracy, to have a society based on merit. So those who have more merit, they would be on the top. Those who would be having less merit would be below. And this merit was determined by education and by the civil service examination. So if you wanted to rise in Chinese society, you would have to qualify in the civil service examination. Even if you belong to a poor peasant family, if your son is able to pass the civil service exam, then your status in society would automatically rise. Now, the whole hierarchy is based on this concept of 4 occupations, okay, which were considered to be the best occupations in Chinese society, but in a hierarchical form. The number 1 occupation was that of a gentry. Gentry refers to an aristocrat, a person, in fact, you can say in ancient China, there used to be a class of people known as the aristocrats. Okay, so first at the top was the royal family, who were connected to the heaven, had some kind of a divine power. Below the royal family would be the aristocrats, and then there will be the gentry. Gentry are land owning, educated people. But in the course of time, what happened in China was the aristocratic privilege was removed, and the state was no longer run by aristocrats but by scholars who passed the civil service exam. So basically, gentry in the course of time became the number 2 layer of society after the royal family. Okay, so gentry are basically scholars and landowners. They earn their living through their knowledge and wisdom. Okay, so they are the number 1 in the hierarchy. Number 2 are peasants. Peasants or nung. So gentry is shi, peasants are nung. So peasants are number 2. Why? Because in China, food was considered to be very important. Remember, I was telling you about the granary system. The duty of the king was to store food grains for society. In case there are some difficulties, the king had to provide food to the people. And so, who grows the food? The peasants. And therefore, the peasants were considered number 2 in the hierarchy. So, number 1 knowledge, number 2 is food. Number 3 artisans. Artisans are people who used to build things, instruments and pots and jewelry, and anyone who did work with their hands to build things, they are the artisans. Or kung. Artisans are kung. Even today, the workers or the proletariat are known as kung. Okay, so because China is a communist state, so this concept of kung is very important. So artisans basically today, in today's terms, would be the industrial workers. So they are number 3. Because they produce implements which are used for agriculture, which are used for running the state, and so they are a very useful profession. So they are below the peasants, but still very important. The number 4 are the merchants. So merchants are people who don't produce anything. Okay, they take things from someone and sell it to someone else, which is an important function according to Confucianism, but the lowest of occupations in the hierarchy. So these are the 4 good occupations, but it is the 4th most among the good occupations, is the 4th number, because they don't produce anything and because they are always hankering for profit. And therefore, Confucians considered merchants to be inferior. In fact, some Western scholars argue that because they consider trade to be inferior, therefore Chinese civilization was not able to compete with the West in the 19th century, because the Western countries, they emphasize on commerce, trade and capitalism. As a result, they grew rich and powerful, while China, which did not encourage trade and commerce, gradually began to decline. It was not able to compete with the capitalist West. Of course, the merchants, once they became rich, they would spend their wealth in order to educate their own sons, so that their sons can give up trade and become scholars themselves. Okay, so this is how but this hierarchy was not based on birth. Okay, it was based on occupation. So suppose there is a merchant or a peasant, if that person has saved some wealth, he could educate his son, and if his son sits for the exam and passes the exam, then he automatically joins the gentry, and the family along with the son will join the gentry. Now you see, it's a very limited kind of a thing, only 4 occupations. There were other occupations also. Say the imperial family, imperial clan, of course they are above everyone else because they had some kind of a divine function. They are connected to heaven, so they are above the gentry. The imperial clan, not just the family but the clan, the whole all the distant relatives and everything of the emperor were considered to be divine. Okay, that is the imperial clan. Then there were other like eunuchs. Eunuchs were very important in Chinese government. They used to live in the palace and serve the king in different ways. And of course the scholars did not like them. They had a lot of power, but the scholars were always suspicious of the eunuchs. So they are not included in the 4 good occupations. Shamans and monks, Buddhist monks, shamans, Taoist priests and so on, they were also not trusted by the scholars. Okay, because these are obviously Confucians. So Confucianism was against other schools of thought. So they are also not included. Soldiers. Soldiers are very important for a state because soldiers fight for the state, they expand the state and so on. But still the soldiers were not considered part of the 4 occupations because the Confucians believe in knowledge and non-violence. Okay, so they considered that to be more important than fighting. Okay, so fighting, being violent was something inferior according to the Confucians. Then of course there were other people like entertainers, slaves, and so they were considered to be very inferior professions and they were not given respect in Chinese society. Of course they were prevalent, but they were not professions of respect. Now all this was based on what is known as the imperial civil service exam. Now this imperial exam system began sometime in the medieval period under the Sui dynasty for the first time. Then it was developed under the Tang dynasty and it came into its full form under the Sung dynasty. And it continued up till 1905 when it was finally abolished with the coming of modernity. Now this civil service exam was based on, remember, the 4 books and 5 classics. Okay, so the students had to memorize all those and sit for exams. Now these exams were at different levels which depended on the dynasty, so it kept on changing. But if I give you a rough idea, there would be 3 levels of exam. The first level of exam was a qualifying exam. If you qualified that, then you will be able to sit in the second level of exam. Okay, so if you pass the second level of exam, you will be posted at the provincial level. So China is a huge country. So it was divided into several provinces and in each province there was a governor appointed by the emperor. So if you pass the second exam, you become eligible to be serving the governor. If you pass the first exam, perhaps you will be at the local level, you will do some service. Then if you pass the third exam, then you are able to serve the emperor directly and you would be called a mandarin. Okay, Mandarin. So the Mandarin Chinese comes from this because that was the language of the top bureaucrats, the top civil servants of the Chinese empire. So you will be posted in the capital and serve the emperor directly. But what happens if you fail the exams? This was a big problem in China because you had to spend a couple of decades mastering these classics and some people failed several times. So generally what happened is those who failed became what? What happens now? Like in India we have the IS exams. So if someone fails, does not qualify the IS exam, what do? They start coaching centers. Okay, same thing in China. In China also, these people went back to the villages and started teaching and preparing other students to qualify for the exam, or otherwise they would go depressed and commit suicide. There are many such things in China, just like it is in India right now, this whole competitive exam situation. So it's very interesting. The British first copied this civil service exam concept from the Chinese. So when the British came in contact with the Chinese, they understood this system and they implemented it in India. So the Indian Civil Service, ICS, was introduced by the British, copying the Chinese system of civil service exam, and we still follow it in UPSC. Okay, so this comes from Confucianism, social hierarchy. Okay, so if I summarize, so this is the Confucian cosmology. Let's look at the diagram that I have made here. This diagram represents the whole Confucian cosmology. It is my humble attempt to represent the whole complexity of Confucianism within this diagram. It may not do justice to it completely, but it's a useful tool to be used. So you can see at the top, this red circle at the top, this is Tian. Tian is heaven. So Confucius believed in the concept of heaven. Now he belonged to the Zhou dynasty period. And so Tian or heaven was the highest deity in China. Okay, so the Shang dynasty had Shangti. Shangti was a kind of a personal god. So there's different gods. The highest god was Shangti. But Tian was different. Tian was not a personal god. It was like a cosmic law. It was an impersonal entity. And all the gods, Chinese gods, were aspects of the Tian. So this is something similar to the Nirguna Brahma concept in say, Hinduism. Okay, so there is a Nirguna Brahma, the absolute reality, and the different gods are only aspects of that reality. So this is Advaita Vedanta concept. So Tian is something like that. It is a cosmic law. Or in the Vedas, there is a concept of rhythm. Okay, this is kind of a seasonal changes that happen, controlled by some higher force. Okay, so that is Tian. So even the gods have to act according to Tian. Tian is superior to everything else. And all these rituals and had to be performed to the Tian by the emperor in order to satisfy heaven. Tian is heaven, or literally it means sky. So from this comes the concept of mandate of heaven. It is heaven that gives mandate to, you can see this yellow dot here, this is the Tianzi, the emperor, the son of heaven. Okay, the son of heaven, the emperor. And this is the earth. So there are three levels. So on the top there is heaven, at the bottom there is earth, in the middle is the son of heaven, who is an intermediary between heaven and earth. And all under heaven, this is the entire earth, is the domain or the jurisdiction of the son of heaven. The Chinese emperor, according to the Chinese or the Confucian thinking, is the center of the universe. So today it is the Chinese state, the party state, which represents the Chinese emperor, right? So this is the son of heaven. Now below the son of heaven are the four occupations, as you can see: Shi, Nung, Kung, and Shang. Okay, the gentry, the peasants, the artisans, and the merchants. And then I have represent this is a concentric circle, as you can see. At the center is the capital Qing. This is where the son of heaven resides. So Qing, as in Peking. Qing means capital, Pei means north capital. This is the capital of China today. So Qing means capital. So capital is a place where the emperor resides. So that is the center of the world. Then there are circles. As you can see, the red circle here is the middle kingdom, Chung Kuo. That is the Chinese name for China. So Chinese people in their own language don't call their country as China. Just like in India, we say Bharat, we don't say India. It's a foreign English name. Similarly, in China is called Chung Kuo, which is middle kingdom. This is the place where the Chinese people live, the descendants of the yellow emperor live. Okay, so they are special people. So they are the center. Then you can see a green circle around here. These are the tributaries. These are the neighboring kingdoms, neighboring peoples who have accepted the greatness of the Chinese civilization. They have kowtowed before the Chinese emperor. So they are protected by China. They are protectorates of China, tributaries of China. So they offer gifts to the Chinese emperor, and in return the Chinese emperor also gives return gifts and gives them protection. In case some other country attacks them, the Chinese emperor would protect them. So something similar that China does now through the Belt and Road Initiative, having the countries like North Korea or Pakistan, they basically behave like tributaries to China. In fact, modern China is becoming more and more ambitious. It wants more and more countries under its sphere of influence. So tributaries are those countries. Then the final circle, the blue circle, are those countries which refuse to accept the superiority of China. So these countries or these people are called barbarians. Okay, these people are enemies of China. So China so the duty of the emperor is to protect China from its enemies, the barbarians. The whole Great Wall of China was built to protect China from the Central Asian tribes like the Mongols and the Manchus, and even there are many tribes before that. So the Great Wall of China was built to keep away these nomadic tribes from attacking China. Japan was considered to be a barbarian country from time to time. So, at certain points of history, Japan copied from China. It took its script and so on. So many ideas went from China to Japan. But at other times, Japan asserted its own independence. It fought against the Chinese. So in those cases, the Japanese were considered to be barbarians. So they are referred to as little barbarians because of the short stature of the Japanese people. The Chinese make fun of the Japanese and call them little barbarians. And I've seen that personally. I was doing a language course and the teacher actually was making fun of the Japanese, calling them little people. Anyhow, then the Europeans who came and colonized parts of China, they were called as sea barbarians or white barbarians, okay, because they of course did not accept the superiority of China. So today, say India, if India refuses to accept the superiority of China, wants to be treated as equal and so on, China does not appreciate that. China appreciates those countries which behave like a subordinate to China. So this is the whole concept of Sinocentric world order. So it's based on the Confucian cosmology. Okay, so it's not based on the Westphalian idea of each nation state being equal and so on. It's based on a hierarchical concept. Okay, so I try to relate Confucianism with today's international politics also. Okay, so this is the cosmology. Now, some developments within Confucianism. Confucianism was the official ideology of the Chinese state for almost, or maybe even more than 2000 years. From the Han Dynasty period to the Qing Dynasty period, Confucianism was the official ideology. So if you are expert in Confucianism, then you will be hired by the state. Okay, and Confucius scholars were supported by the state. But then there are some other ideas, especially Buddhism. Now Buddhism went from India to China through the Silk Road. I won't go into details, I'll have another lecture on Buddhism. So suffice to say that Buddhism had become very popular. During the Tang Dynasty period, Buddhism reached its peak of influence. There are a number of Buddhist viharas in China, Buddhist temples. There are thousands of monks and nuns who lived in these temples. There's a famous Shaolin monastery which was founded by an Indian prince, a Buddhist monk, Bodhidharma. Okay, where the kung fu and all these martial arts developed. Kumarajiva was an Indian scholar who translated Buddhist works into Chinese language from Sanskrit. Okay, so India had a lot of influence in that way. But the Chinese considered, the certain Chinese emperors considered Buddhism to be a kind of a drain on their wealth, because the monks were not doing any work, they were not producing anything, and they were living by begging. And these monasteries and the temples had to be maintained by donations by rich people and the state. And so at one point, an emperor, Wu Chung, he started persecution of Buddhists. He forcefully closed down a lot of temples, destroyed monasteries, and forced these monks and nuns to get married, gave them some land, told them to become peasants and earn their own living. So there has been a tussle between Buddhism and Confucianism over time. But Buddhism was very popular among the people. So certain Confucian scholars, for example, Chu Si and Wang Yangming, as you can see here, the names, they developed what is known as Neo-Confucianism, which basically included aspects of Buddhism and aspects of Taoism, at the same time rejecting some other concepts. For example, they were completely against the concept of reincarnation and karma. They did not believe in karma theory or the concept of reincarnation. They believed in one birth, and they believe after death you become spirits, and the ancestors, you have to worship the ancestors. Okay, so the ancestors don't take another body. So that was not considered to be a good idea by the Confucians. But say other aspects like Wang Yangming, he believed that there's merit to meditation, dhyana, it can help you to control your senses and to perform the rituals. And so that aspect of Buddhism is very useful. It is what they believed. And so there was a period of syncretism beginning in the Sung dynasty period and going well into the Ming dynasty period, as you can see here. So Chu Si, he belonged to the Sung dynasty period. Wang Yangmin belonged to the Ming dynasty period. So Neo-Confucianism basically, and which is based on a lot on the teachings of Mencius, it became the official ideology of the Chinese state until impact of modernity. As you can see here, modernity came to China. China was defeated by European powers. It was semi-colonized, and so among the Chinese youth, there was a feeling of hatred towards Confucianism. They believed that it is Confucianism that had led to the decline of China. Confucianism was an outdated idea. There was need to adopt Western values and Western ideas. So there is a famous May 4th movement of 1919, after China had been forced to give some of the territorial rights to Japan, because Japan had modernized and westernized. China was still left behind. So the students, they demanded that Mr. Science and Mr. Democracy should be the new leaders of China. Chinese people should learn science, not Confucian classics, but scientific texts, physics, chemistry, maths, so on, biology and so on, so forth. And as a system of government, they should follow a democratic system with their own parliament and constitutional system of government. Plus, there was another movement, that is the Communist movement. So the Communist Party of China was founded in 1921. So this was another stream of modernity that had emerged in China. And the Communist Party became very popular because initially, as I was telling you, the Chinese youth were attracted towards the West. They wanted to learn from the West. But gradually they realized that the West was trying to appease Japan, and as a result China was suffering. And so the West became less and less popular in China, and Soviet Union, which was a revolutionary state which had established a new kind of a government, started becoming more popular. So the Soviet Union, through its agency called Communist International, influenced the Chinese Communist Party. It guided the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, so of course this is the history. But as a result of these developments, the popularity of Confucianism began to erode. There were some Confucian philosophers who developed what is known as New Confucianism as a response, but it did not succeed. The Communist Party took over. 1st of October 1949, the People's Republic of China was founded. Mao Zedong, the leader of Communist China, was completely against Confucianism. He hated Confucius. These graves of Confucian scholars, including Confucius, were desecrated by the Red Guards. A lot of destruction of Confucius temples. So Confucianism declined in China during the communist period until the 21st century. So in the beginning of 21st century, China was a rising power. It was developing economically. It was becoming the exporter to the world. It was becoming the industrial hub. And there were a lot of societal problems because of that. There were environmental problems. There were problems with regards to one-child policy. Family values were declining. Okay, people are not getting the men were not getting women to get married because of female feticide, because you could have only one child. So the parents preferred a male child. So all these problems were going on in Chinese society. So the Communist Party leadership under Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao, they supported a concept known as harmonious society, trying to bring in Confucian values back into the Chinese society. Okay, so it's a kind of a communist, a Confucianism kind of a combination. So in 2005, it was made part of the official policy of the Chinese government. Domestically harmonious society, internationally harmonious world. Of course, Xi Jinping has taken a different turn. Xi Jinping is not as enthusiastic about Confucianism as Hu Jintao. So the new government has, although I'd say there's still a lot of influence of Confucian thought in Chinese leaders. So a couple of scholars I'd like to mention. Yan Suetong, Moral Realism. I'd perhaps discuss it in some future lectures in details. Daniel Bell, he talks about political meritocracy. So Yang Tse-tung is more influenced by Sun Tzu, his philosophy. Daniel Bell wants to project China as an alternative to the liberal democratic model of the West, which would be based on what he calls as political meritocracy. So I'll stop here with regards to Confucianism. Let me summarize before we end some of the points that we discussed today. Okay, so we discussed Confucianism. We talked about who Confucius was, what were the ideas that influenced him. Then we talked about the 4 books and 5 classics, which are the source books of Confucian. Confucian ideas come from these books, and the scholars had to memorize and master these works in order to pass the civil service exams. Then we talked about the Confucian education system, development of 5 cardinal values to become a gentleman. And then we talked about the 2 subdivisions within the educational philosophy, one represented by Mencius, who believed human nature is good, while Sun Tzu believed that human nature is evil. Then we talked about the social relations, harmonious society based on social relations. We talked about 5 great relations. Then we talked about social hierarchy based on meritocracy with the 4 occupations and the imperial exam system. And then I explained a diagram that I had drawn for you. It's a very useful diagram according to me. So you can practice drawing this. And then we talked about the later developments, Neo-Confucianism and New Confucianism. So until the next lecture, thank you. Traditional Chinese thought is based on the Confucian cosmology. So it's named after Confucius, but this cosmology is a product of generations of Chinese thinkers. And to an extent, even today in China, a kind of a Confucian mindset exists, although it has changed because of the communist revolution. So according to the Confucian cosmology, at the top is heaven or Tian. Tian is at the top. Then below is the earth. Heaven at the top, earth at the bottom. In the middle is the son of heaven. Tianzi is the son of heaven, the Chinese emperor, or in modern parlance you will say the Chinese state. So according to the Confucian cosmology, the Chinese state is an intermediary between heaven, which is the truth, the cosmic law, and us, that is the people on earth. So state plays a very important role in Chinese thinking. And at the center of this whole state system that exists on this earth is Chungguo, the Chinese nation. Chungguo is the Chinese nation at the center. In the middle is Qing, the capital, where the government resides. So government is at the center, and then there are the Chinese people. And beyond that, there are 2 types of people. There are the tributaries and the barbarians. Those people who accept the greatness of Chinese civilization, they follow Chinese leadership, are the tributaries, and those who refuse to challenge Chinese supremacy are the barbarians. So this is a kind of a basic structure of Chinese foreign policy. China gives maximum importance to its own people, its own nation, China first. And then it has friendly relations with those countries which accept the Chinese conditions. China sometimes is very liberal. Those who are ready to accept Chinese conditions, China liberally gives them what they want. But those nations which don't accept the supremacy of China, which challenge Chinese hegemony, they are considered to be barbarians. China looks at them with suspicion and does not cede even a an inch of ground to these countries which are barbarians. So, we must keep in mind this Chinese cosmology while the Confucian cosmology while studying China's foreign policy. Thank you.